The first app I ever built, the story, the struggle, the breakthrough. I want to take you back to the beginning, before 7 apps, before the ecosystem, before the affiliate programs, before the revenue, before any of it. I want to take you to the moment I decided to build my first app, because that moment changed everything. Not because the app was great. It was not great. It was messy and rough and full of problems, but because that moment was the moment I crossed the line between thinking about building and actually building. And crossing that line is the hardest part of the entire journey. I had been thinking about building an app for months. I had the idea, a financial education platform for parents, something that would teach people about money in a way that was accessible, practical, and judgment-free. I had the content in my head. Years of experience, years of learning, years of making mistakes with money and learning from them. I knew what people needed to know. I knew how they needed to hear it. I knew the gaps in existing financial education. I had everything I needed except the ability to build. I had been looking for a developer for weeks. I posted on freelance platforms. I asked friends. I contacted agencies. The quotes came back. 5,000 euros, 10,000 euros, 15,000 euros for a basic version, a minimum viable product. I did not have 5,000 euros. I did not have 1,000 euros. I had an idea and zero budget. And every developer I spoke to wanted money before they would start. None would work for equity. None would work for deferred payment. None would work for a share of future revenue. They wanted cash up front, and I did not have cash. So the idea sat in my head for months. I would think about it while cooking, while driving, while lying in bed. I would imagine the features, the pages, the user flow. I would mentally design the whole app in my mind, and then I would remember that I could not build it, and the idea would go back on the shelf. It was painful, like having a book inside you that you cannot write, a song you cannot sing, a story you cannot tell. The idea was alive inside me, but I had no way to bring it into the world. Then one evening, I was scrolling through social media, and I saw a post about a platform called Base 44. The post said you can build apps without writing code. AI does the building. You just describe what you want. I was skeptical. I had heard claims like this before. No code tools that promised to make anyone a builder. But every time I tried one, the reality did not match the promise. The tools were either too limited or too complex. They required more technical knowledge than they claimed, or they produced apps that looked amateur. So I was skeptical. But I was also desperate, and desperation makes you willing to try things that skepticism would normally prevent. I signed up, I logged in, I stared at the screen, and I did not know what to do. The interface was unfamiliar. The terminology was new. Entities, pages, back-end functions. I did not know what any of it meant. I felt like I was in a foreign country where everyone spoke a language I did not understand. I almost closed the laptop. Almost. But something stopped me. The idea. The financial education platform that had been living in my head for months. It whispered, try, just try. So I typed my first instruction. I want to build a financial education platform for parents. I was not sure if the AI would understand. I was not sure if it would produce anything usable. I pressed enter and waited. The AI started responding. It described what it was building. It asked me questions about the features I wanted. It suggested a structure, pages for the home page, a pricing page, a course page, an entity for users, an entity for lessons, an entity for enrollments. It was reading my mind, not perfectly, but close enough that I felt something I had not felt in months. Hope. I spent the next 4 hours in a state that I can only describe as flow. The AI and I were in a conversation. I described, it built, I reviewed. I adjusted. It rebuilt. I added. It adjusted. It was like having a developer who worked at the speed of thought, who never got tired, who never needed a break, who understood my vision and translated it into reality. For the first time in months, I was building, not thinking about building, not imagining building, actually building, and the feeling was electric. But it was not all smooth. There were moments of frustration, moments when the AI did not understand what I wanted, moments when the output was not what I envisioned. I described a feature and the AI built something different. I adjusted my description and it still missed. I was getting frustrated. I started to think maybe this does not work. Maybe the idea is too complex. Maybe I need to simplify. And that is when I learned one of the most important lessons in vibe coding. The problem was not the AI. The problem was my description. I was being vague. I was saying make it look nice instead of describing exactly what nice meant. I was saying I want a good user experience instead of describing each step of the experience. I was saying make it easy to use instead of describing what easy looked like for my specific user. The AI was not mind reading, it was interpreting, and my vague instructions produced vague results. So I changed my approach. I started describing things in detail, not just what I wanted, but how it should work, what the user sees first, what happens when they click, where they go next, what data is displayed, what happens on success, what happens on error. I described each page like I was writing a script for a movie. Scene by scene, step by step, click by click, and the AI started nailing it. Not every time, but most of the time. And when it missed, I adjusted my description and it adjusted the output. We were collaborating, man and machine, vision and execution, ideas and implementation. By the end of that first session, I had a working app. It was rough. The design was basic, the features were minimal, there were bugs, but it was real. It existed. I could open it in a browser, I could create a user, I could log in, I could view a lesson, I could enroll in a course. It was not a finished product, but it was a product, and it was mine. I had built it. Me, a non-technical mother of 4 with no coding experience and no budget. I had built a working application in 4 hours for the cost of a subscription. I cried. I am not embarrassed to say that. I sat at my desk and I cried. Not from sadness, from relief, from the release of months of frustration, from the realization that the idea that had been trapped in my head could finally come out, from the understanding that I was not helpless. I was not dependent on developers. I was not limited by my budget. I could build. The barrier between idea and reality had been removed, and the emotion of that realization overwhelmed me. That first app was not Smart Investor Leader. Not yet. It was a prototype, a rough draft, the seed of what would become Smart Investor Leader. But that seed contained everything: the financial education focus, the parent audience, the lesson structure, the enrollment flow. The core of the platform was built in that first session. Everything that came after was refinement, polish, addition, improvement. But the foundation was laid in 4 hours on a Tuesday evening. Over the next 2 weeks, I refined the app. I added features. I improved the design. I wrote the content. I created the challenge. I set up the payment processing. I built the affiliate program. I added the email sequences. Each feature was a new session with the AI. Each session was a conversation. Describe, build, review, adjust, repeat. The app evolved from rough prototype to polished product, one conversation at a time. I want to share the specific struggles I faced with that first app, because I think they are universal. Every new builder faces them. The first struggle was the blank page. When I started, I did not know what to type. The input box was empty and my mind went blank. I had been thinking about the app for months, But when it came time to describe it, I froze. The solution was to start small. Instead of describing the whole app, I described one page. Just the home page. What should it show? What should it say? What should the user see first? Once I described one page, the rest flowed. The blank page is intimidating, but a blank page for one page is manageable. Start with one page, build momentum, then expand. The second struggle was feature creep. As I built, I kept thinking of new features. What if I add a forum? What if I add a calculator? What if I add a video library? What if I add a chat? Each feature seemed essential in the moment, but each feature added complexity and time. I had to discipline myself to build the core first, the essential features that made the app useful, then launch, then add features based on user feedback, not based on my imagination. The discipline to launch without every feature was harder than building the features themselves, because every feature felt necessary, but most were not. The third struggle was perfectionism. Every time I looked at the app, I saw flaws. The spacing was off. The colors were not quite right. The text was too long. The images were not perfect. I wanted to fix everything before launching. I spent days adjusting things that users would never notice. And each day of adjustment was a day without users. I had to learn that done is better than perfect. Launch the imperfect version. Get feedback. Improve based on real data, not imagined criticism. The users do not care about your spacing. They care about whether the app solves their problem. Focus on the problem, not the pixels. The fourth struggle was fear of launching. The app was ready, not perfect but ready, and I was afraid to launch. What if nobody signs up? What if people laugh? What if there is a bug? What if the payment does not work? What if I forgot something? The fear was paralyzing. I almost did not launch. I sat on the finished app for 3 days before I found the courage to share it. 3 days of unnecessary fear. 3 days of lost users. 3 days of lost revenue. The fear of launching was worse than any problem I encountered after launching. When I finally launched, the response was underwhelming. A few sign-ups, some polite feedback, no viral explosion, no instant success, just a few people who were interested. And that was enough, because those few people were real. They were using something I had built. They were benefiting from something that had existed only in my head a few weeks earlier. That was the breakthrough. Not the number of users, the fact of users, the transition from idea to reality, from imagination to impact. That is the breakthrough that matters. Everything else is scale. The first app taught me everything. How to describe features, how to iterate, how to handle frustration, how to manage feature creep, how to overcome perfectionism, how to face the fear of launching. Every lesson I use today came from that first app. And I did not learn any of it from a course or a book. I learned it by building, by doing, by failing and adjusting and trying again. That is the only way to learn. You cannot read about swimming. You have to get in the water. I want to say something to anyone listening who has an idea trapped in their head, an app you have been thinking about for weeks or months or years, an idea that you know is good but you have not built because you cannot code and you cannot afford a developer. That idea does not have to stay trapped. The tools exist, the platforms exist, the ability exists. You just need to start. Open the platform, type one instruction, describe one page, build one feature, one step. That is all it takes. One step, and the idea starts becoming real. If you want to learn how to build your first app, join me at 7D AI Academy. I will walk you through the exact process I used to build my first app. Step by step, page by page, feature by feature. Search for 7D AI Academy online and start building today. I am Smarty, and this has been episode 17 of Vibe Coding with Purpose. In the next episode, we are going to talk about how to describe your app to the AI, the art of the prompt, how to communicate your vision clearly enough that the AI can build it. See you there.